Olá a todos. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to look at the verb ser, to be, versus estar, to be. So two ways to say to be in Portuguese. Let's look a little deeper. Follow me. All right, so here we go. We're going to go look at the verb ser and the verb estar. And essentially, both these verbs in English translate to be. There are two forms of the verb to be. So in Portuguese, in European Portuguese, and really Brazilian Portuguese, it's no different in this regard. We need to know the distinction between the two because they express vastly different things, and it's just one of those intricacies that don't translate into English. So without further ado, let's keep going. So the verb ser is used to express permanence. It is the verb to be. And this is a tendency. It's almost always this is the case. It expresses things that don't particularly change. So let's just go through the pronunciation of each conjugation of the verb of the present tense. We're only looking at present tense at this moment. There are various tenses: past, present, future, present perfect, past. There's so many of them. But for now, we're just going to focus on the present tense, o presente do indicativo. So I'm gonna recite them, and then I'll give you some time between to kind of listen to how I pronounce them, and then give you some time to say it yourself. So here we go. Eu sou. Eu sou. Eu sou. And that means I am. And again, these are things that when we look at them with examples after, when we're talking about what actually is in this case, we'll see how the verb ser is used to express permanence. So let's move on. So tu és is the you informal, so you are. Tu és. Tu és. Then we have the you formal, which again in English is not something that we distinguish between. There's just you. But in Portuguese, know that there's a formal you, você, and an informal you, tu. If you might want to check out my other video on tu versus você, where I go a little bit deeper into that, but ultimately just know there are two distinctions. So você would be você é. Você é. And then as you'll notice, the conjugation of the third person singular, ele, he, and she, they have the same format. So você é is a you formal. Then ele é, and ela é, ela é. Then we move on to the first person plural, we are. So nós somos, nós somos, nós somos. And then we'll move on to third person plural. In this case, we're going to talk about the you, the royal you, y'all, if you will. You have you are, and in Portuguese it would be vocês são. Vocês são. Vocês são. Okay? So again, it looks a lot like the you formal, but it's not. This is not a formal or informal. It's just how you would address a group of people if you're talking directly to them. And you'll also notice that the conjugation in the third person plural for they has the same format. So the distinction between eles and elas is typically along gender lines, but know that like almost every other time you have a mixed group, it's going to take the male form, the masculine form. In this case, eles são would refer to a group of all males that you're not a part of. That's over there, third person that you're referring to. Or a mixed group, if there are males and females. So they, male and mixed, would be eles são. And then lastly, you have the third person plural, but this case, a whole group of girls, females, that you're referring to, elas são. Elas são. All right, so let's look at estar. And estar expresses transition, things that can change in a brief period of time. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means and give you some examples for both ser and estar. But know that estar is more of a transitionary form of to be, things that can shift from in a short period of time, a relatively short period of time. So we'll do the same thing. We're going to go through and listen to, you'll hear me pronounce them and just kind of point to which subject we're talking about and any distinctions that you need to know. So we'll start off with I am. Eu estou. Eu estou. Eu estou. Then that's I am. So we'll move on to the you informal. Again, this applies to every single verb. There's a you formal and a you informal. So you informal, you are. Tu estás. Tu estás. Tu estás. And then the you formal would be você está. Você está. Você está. Moving on to third person singular, we'll start with he. Ele está. Ele está. Ele está. And now she is. Ela está. Ela está. Ela está. Moving on to first person plural. If you're a part of the group that is, right? If it's something that you're belonging to, you would say nós estamos. Nós estamos. Nós estamos. And if you notice with nós and really with so far it's a little bit clearer with nós because nós ends with the s, that z sound, the nós. It kind of blends right into the verb in this case. So it's more like nós estamos. If you're going to hear an authentic European Portuguese person speak this, it would be nós estamos. So and that's what makes the language a little bit harder to learn. It's because there are these combinations, these words that seem to get blended in together. But then you have these hard sounds as well in some words that kind of feel like it's all choppy. So I want to give you the authentic sound of what you would hear if you were in Portugal. So one more time, nós estamos. Nós estamos. And you'll hear it as well with vocês, because it has that S at the end of vocês. And this is the you all, the you, the royal you. Vocês estão. Vocês estão. Vocês estão. And then they, that mixed group or that all-male group, would be eles estão. Eles estão. Eles estão. And then the all-female group that you're not a part of, elas estão. Elas estão. Elas estão. All right. So just a little bit more with ser. It's really used to talk about what something is and to describe characteristics that are an essential part of whatever noun is in question. And again, there's a tendency, I can't say that it's 100% because it's not. There's a very clear one that I'll bring up after we've looked at both ser and estar, just to kind of show you how it really isn't across the board, and definitely not the permanence and transience thing. So there is a tendency that ser expresses the idea that the characteristics that don't change about a thing, about a noun, right? Whether it's a person, place, thing, we're talking about things that kind of stay the same over a short, medium, long period of time. So what something is, a definition when you're defining things, describing characteristics that are essential to the thing in question. So some examples. You would use ser again to express things, the states of being that are permanent. So identification and description. So what I mean by identifications is if I'm referring to, I want to say that person over there is Sergio, right? Ele é o Sergio. So it's the third person singular of the verb ser é, which is he is Sergio. Ele é o Sergio. Or let's say I want to tell you the capital of Portugal, right? The capital of Portugal is Lisbon. So in Portuguese, it'd be a capital de Portugal é Lisboa. That's most likely, it can change, if there are governmental policies and whatever, things that is something that is changeable. But in its essence, it's a defining characteristic. It's something that's not likely to change. A capital de Portugal é Lisboa. Not está Lisboa, é Lisboa. And that's when we're thinking about identification. Then descriptions also, you want to use the verb ser because you're describing what something is, the key component, right? The essential characteristics of a thing. So if we're talking about saying, we want to say that the house is white. Well, a casa é branca. It wouldn't be a casa está branca. I mean, if it looked like it was white and it normally wasn't white, I guess you could use that. But when we're describing the thing as it is, if you're telling somebody, hey, you want to look for the White House, a casa é branca. And then just another example with a car. The car is big. O carro é grande. O carro é grande. Okay? And then estar is used to talk about how something is. So it's used with conditions, locations, emotions, and temporary states like actions, right? Things that are in the course of happening. So it would make sense that if ser is to express things that are a little bit more static and permanent, there's a tendency, again, I want to use that tendency because it's not 100%, estar is used to express transients, things that do shift, things that can change in a short, medium period of time. So a couple of things that we want to look at, a couple of examples. You want to use estar to express the location of people or movable objects. We want to ask where Sergio is. Where is Sergio? Onde está o Sérgio? So it wouldn't be onde é o Sérgio. That wouldn't make sense because it's not a static thing, right? The location of this person. So it's onde está o Sérgio? Where is he at this moment? We can't find him. Está aqui. He is here, right? But that can change in a minute. I can go in the other room and all of a sudden I'm no longer here. Estou ali, right? You'll say ele está aqui if you want to say he is here, or ele está ali. It's not on the screen, but just know that it shifts. It's that verb that shows that he's not stuck in that spot. He's a movable object. He's a moving noun. Let's put it that way. So the next one we're going to look at books, static object, right? An item that is not alive, but it works in both ways. Whether we're talking about a person, we're talking about the location of this person or things. So in this case, we're going to look at books. Are the books here? The question asks. You would ask that in Portuguese as os livros estão aqui? Os livros estão aqui? Are the books here? Não. Estão em casa. No, they're at home. Não. Estão em casa. So again, when you're talking about the location of people or movable objects, it's the verb estar. And also another thing that theoretically is a shifting state would be someone's state of health, right? If you're talking about how somebody's feeling. So think about that. I guess say it would be more of like what. Estar is more of how, right? How would you find this thing at that particular moment? So in this case, let's look at asking how Mr. Fernandes is. How is Mr. Fernandes? Como está o Sr. Fernandes? Como está o Sr. Fernandes? Está muito bem. Está muito bem. He is very well. So, how is Mr. Fernandes? Como está o Sr. Fernandes? And the response would be, está muito bem. He is very well. And then, if you want to ask someone directly how they're feeling at that particular moment in time, estás bem? And that's the you informal, right? Tu estás. I left it out to show you that you don't need to have that subject pronoun there. It's implied that it's tu. Tu estás bem or estás bem? Are you okay? And the response could be, in this case, it's not feeling quite well. I'm a little tired. Não, estou pouco cansado. Não, estou pouco cansado. So you wouldn't say that you're not always tired, or if you do, you may want to check up on that, but you wouldn't say não, sou pouco cansado, because that would imply that that's just part of your personality. It's who you are. You're tired. But that's not, tired isn't one of those things. Like we can have moments of being tired, but typically it's a shifting state of health or state of being. So that's that when it comes to ser versus estar. There's, again, two forms of the verb to be. You just got to think about the different tendencies that we talked about. Remember, ser is permanence, or at least it tends to be permanent, and then estar expresses more transience, or tends to, I should say. So I hope you enjoyed that, and check out my website, sapedrosa.com, if you're looking for one-on-one language lessons or other goodies, or you want to subscribe to my email list. I tend to send out periodic resources and other language learning opportunities for those looking for European Portuguese. So follow me on Instagram at Surge of Language. And check me out on Facebook. I'm on all the different platforms. So just hit me up if you need anything. Take care. Até já. Até a próxima.